my caregiver journey ended, it wasn't just about the grief. It was very interesting because I asked people, what do we do about the recovering caregiver part? I was in a situation where my father had died 6 months before my mother, and I was not my father's caregiver. And so I knew how to do grief. I had been doing grief classes and I was still on that journey, but it was different with my mom because I had cared for her for 10 years. For 10 years, I was on call 24/7. For 10 years, I was either coming out of an emergency, going into an emergency, recovering from an emergency, or preparing for an emergency. So the caregiver recovery piece was a lot different. And so I had to do things like change the ringtone on my phone, because every time my phone went off, whether it was a text or a call, the anxiety in my body shot up like, oh my God, what's wrong with mom? And mom wasn't there anymore. And before I started caring for my mother, I was on 3 softball teams, I traveled all the time, I had a ton of money, all of these things. I had depleted all my funds because I paid for all my mother's care. I was now 54 years old, really not in shape after caregiving and, not taking care of myself for a long time. And I had to figure out what I liked again. So I had to write a list of things that I like to do within my budget. I also had to write a list of things that I wanted to try, because there are so many things that I hadn't been able to try in 10 years. I also had to start going to the doctors for myself. Some of the stats for family caregivers, I think it's like 30% of family caregivers pass before the person they're caring for, 35% of the caregivers pass within 5 years of the person they're caring for, and people over 70, 65% of them pass before the person they're caring for. So I knew I was on the clock to get my health back in shape. And the more my body started to not be in fight or flight mode, the more my body started to not be so stressed and started to relax, the more some of those health problems and things I ignored started to come up. I had to start learning to regulate my food and my water, because before, what I ate and when I ate and how I ate and what I could afford to eat was all based on how's mom today, right? So there are a lot of things that went into my caregiver recovery, and I think that that's one of the things after someone passes that we care for that people really aren't talking about. They're talking about the grief portion of it. And there are a lot of resources out there for grief, and if you make sure to like and follow me, I will be talking about that as well.